Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project with E.C. Sinkowski. My name is Patrick Cummings. In every episode, I have the distinct privilege of presenting E.C. with a question on subject matters that range from nutrition to fitness to the choices we can all make to live a healthier, more functional life. By exploring both the principles at play and the actions worth carrying out as a result, we aim to get you thinking, get you moving, and get you taking more consistent steps toward optimizing your well-being. Thank you, as always, for tuning into the show. And how are you, E.C.?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Today we're going to talk about loopholes, not the legislative kind,
Correct.
the diet kind. The diet kind. We don't have enough time to fix legislative loopholes.
No.
And so we're going to talk about cheating on your diet, basically, and why folks do it, and maybe some reasons or some ways that we can avoid looking for loopholes and looking for shortcuts. Before we do, as we often talk about here at the beginning of the show, you have something new. You often have new things that you're working on, that you're offering. Folks who aren't trying to build something might not understand, but mostly building things, building a brand, building a business, mostly is, I'm going to throw this one up against the wall and see if it sticks. So you've got something that I'm actually really excited about. You've got a member site or a membership service that you're working on. Let's tell folks about it.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of bonus content to my email list. And so I'm going to switch a lot of that bonus content to my member site. And then, of course, also still continue with the email list in some form. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be at members.optimizemenutrition.com. And the idea is, kind of this more in-depth look at some of the topics. They generally kind of come off of the podcast, like kind of a spin-off question or topic of a podcast. So that will continue. I also want to offer another Q&A to that audience as well. And I see that this member site would also have different add-ons throughout the year, maybe a couple diet tune-ups during the year, a couple diet challenges, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's for the person who wants to, just get a little bit deeper into the nutrition topics. And so, to check it out, if people are interested, they can get their first month free with the coupon first month. And there'll be a link in the show notes, I think.
That's right. And for folks who don't know, I see how much work goes into just prepping for these episodes. And so I'm excited for you to be able to share, we intentionally keep these episodes to about 20 to 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more there when you actually dig into it. And so I'm excited for those folks who want it to be able to start getting access to the sort of the deeper dives.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. All right. Talking about loopholes and cheating on your diet today, let's define some terms. What do you mean by loopholes?
Yeah, when I think about loopholes, I think about shortcuts, a way that you can be technically correct according to the letter of the law, yet miss the big picture. And, in the big picture in the nutrition sense is what's the physiological effect? Did you get the weight loss? Did you get the mass gain? Did you get the better performance? And a loophole would sort of bring in that check the box mentality phenomenon, like checking the box. Yeah, I go to the gym 5 days a week, but I end up spending most of the time scrolling on my phone. I mean, sure, you put the clothes on, you're at the gym, but you aren't really doing anything with any sort of dose that's going to get the change in your physique. So that's what I mean when I say loophole.
And what do they look like when we're talking about or thinking about diet and nutrition? Why or where are there loopholes in this particular realm?
Yeah, diets definitely have loopholes. People need to understand that diets are not the same thing as how your physiology works, right? Diets are simple. Your physiology is not. And I've said it before, but a great way to think about diets, they're the shorthand way to get the physiology right, a shorthand way to control quality and quantity in the diet. And to take an example, eliminating added sugar is certainly a way that you can control for some level of quantity and quality in one's diet. And it makes things super simple when you walk into the kitchen. It makes things very black and white, what you're allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to eat. That's just not how physiology works, though. Physiology is not black and white. It's nuanced, and your body can handle sugar. And yes, the chemical structure of fructose in your fruit is the same as the fructose in the candy bar, but the nuance there is that nobody eats fructose, right? They eat fruit or they eat the candy bar, and that contains a varying amount of fructose and a bunch of other components in it. Mm-hmm. And what those components are and how much there are of them matter. And so you can already see that this explanation of the nuance becomes rather lengthy. And so the person who wants this, quick diet tip, they're going to want something more simple. They're going to want the black and white, but yet in the end, it's that lack of accuracy, it's that lack of nuance that creates this faulty yes-no system.
Are there common, categories of loopholes that maybe we can look at or think about or try to work our way around?
Yeah, I was thinking about how to explain the various loopholes that I see in the different diets. And I think there's kind of two broad categories for how loopholes sort of play out in real life. And the first one is, what's a loophole that allows me to do less work? Yep. And the second would be, what's a loophole that allows me to eat the foods that I want, which are probably restricted on this diet? So either less work or like, let me do what I want, even though I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, which is kind of the two sides of the same coin.
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
True.
Yeah.
True. In some ways. The first one of how do I do less work, there seems to be this natural thought process, and I would love to know if it's, more of a human nature thing or more of it's a kind of a cultural American thing. It's hard to say because obviously I have a biased view of that. But there's this natural thought process of like, when we start something that's a change, like how can I make this more convenient? How can I make this easier? How can I do less of a change than what I'm prescribed to do? How can I make the change the least drastic? And from an evolutionary perspective, that makes a lot of sense. I think it helped keep us safe in a lot of ways. Like, let's make this environment less austere. Let me protect myself from the lions and the storms and the heat extremes, right? And there's also tons of these continuous improvements that happen in terms of businesses and efficiency and how do we cut costs to make things more economical. Like, that's all really good. I think what's interesting is in terms of reaching weight, health, and performance goals, it doesn't work that way. It's quite the opposite. And I think we talked about this in the Why It's Okay to Be Hungry podcast. But the degree of change from where you are now to where you want to be speaks to how much work you're going to have to put into the effort. If you're already a top athlete or you have already the chiseled six-pack abs or whatever, you don't really have to put in more work. Yes, you're doing a ton of work, but it's really kind of like the degree of change of where you need to go. There's no more degree of change. You just have to keep maintaining. Yep. But when you have someone who has a significant amount of weight to lose, that's a big change from where they currently are. If you have 0 muscle ups and want 10, you're going to have to put in a lot of work. And so I think it's just important to point out that what might benefit us in like a business or convenience sense doesn't really come with the same ROI for weight, health, and performance. And I think a classic example in nutrition, to kind of bring this back to the diet loopholes, and I get this a lot, with the 800-gram challenge, is like, why do I have to eat the fruits and veggies? Like, why can't I just take the supplement or the powders, Or even like, why doesn't dried fruit count? Why can't I just have the dried fruit and then drink the water as a chaser?
I have not thought of doing that, but okay.
I've even heard that for like the roasted vegetables, right? Like the water weight's reduced. So why don't I eat the roasted vegetables and then drink the water and get the total weight combined? And the black and white interpretation of that, to go back to like the rules, right? Like, yeah, you are getting the water. Yeah, you are getting the nutrients. The specific nuance in that case is the digestion process isn't the same for the glass of water plus powder as it is for the combined fruit with water in it. And it's just interesting that our mind kind of jumps to that conclusion, right? Like, well, why can't I just do it? Why can't I just do it this way? Why can't I just make it, quote, easier? And we sort of all naturally go there in some ways. And ultimately what happens kind of with the powders plus the water is you end up being more hungry. The digestion process, like I said, doesn't work the same. It doesn't stay in the stomach quite as long. You don't feel as full, and you're more likely to reach for other things besides fruits and veggies. And I think one more way I'll point out with the 800-gram challenge is another kind of classic loophole in the sense of how can I make this easier? And I'm going to pick on watermelon, although we could do it with another food. People quickly realize watermelon is heavy and tastes delicious. And it's like, well, why don't I just do the entire 800-gram challenge on this? Yeah. The black and white is, yes, that fits the rules. The nuance is you've missed the whole diversity of nutrients, diversity of fiber types, diversity of phytochemicals. And so again, that's just sort of a way that, you can check the box mentality, but you sort of miss the bigger picture.
Jokingly, I was weighing some grapes the other day, and I realized that each grape weighed 8 grams, and I thought I could just eat 100 of these right now and be done for the day. Obviously, I didn't, but so I feel those who want to do the 800-gram watermelon challenge. I've had that thought as well. Okay, that was kind of the first loophole. The second one being, well, let me do this, but let me squeeze in the foods that I would like to eat, please. What is the kind of the context for that one?
Yeah, totally. I did another Instagram post that was just sort of like, any diet that has these restrictions of don't eat X, we end up coming up with all these really odd ways to eat X. It's like keto cereal and sugar-free donuts and paleo ice cream. It's just sort of like, well, this is odd, and that's definitely a common loophole I see, that ultimately when we have these kind of restrictive diets is it keeps coming back to the fact that people want to eat their junk food and they're going to find a way to eat the junk food. And again, it kind of has this check the box sort of mentality. It's like, we could pick paleo. It's like, yes, well, I'm eating paleo, even though these brownies are cacao powder, coconut oil, and almond butter, right? I mean, that's the black and white. The nuance is you're not going to see the results because the nuance is your physiology is responding to the total caloric need, the total carbs, fat, vitamins, and minerals. And doing the paleo brownies, you aren't going to get the total across all of those categories that you want. You're basically on those paleo variations eating the standard American diet with more expensive ingredients. You just have to kind of call yourself out. And I see it all the time. And this is where following rules blindly is a problem, And I don't know, it's funny. In some sense, like we want to comply, we want to do the right thing, we want to check the box, but then we also have this side of us where it's like, well, I want to do what I want, and this tastes good, and this is what I'm going to eat, and still follow the rules. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy.
It's literally the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure. And by design, that's why I kind of put very few rules in the 800-gram challenge. I wanted it to be more like a guide than a guru, I think, as you said in one of our last podcasts. I didn't want this sort of check the box mentality, although certainly there's ways to go about it. But in the end of it, like people want to eat these junk foods. I'm right there with you in the sense of I think they taste good too. They are part of my diet on some days. And it's just so funny. It's like, this is all the stuff that we're eating too much of. This is the stuff that people really like. So why are we setting up these diets that are like, don't eat any of them, right? Because inevitably you're going to find a way to have the donut, even if it's not allowed on keto, right? It's going to become the sugar alcohol variation of the donut or something like that. Right. So it's just sort of another way that we have these loopholes.
Yeah. I don't remember if this is just me putting words in your mouth, but what I think about there is, I think you've said it to me, is just like, let's start with reality and go from there. And that might be something that, again, putting, words in your mouth or not, but that to me is very much at the heart of a lot of your advice, a lot of your work that you do is, okay, let's start with where humans actually, or how humans actually behave. And then let's design something that takes that into, that appreciates that and goes from there. That being said, the $1 million question is, what do we need to do in order to get ourselves beyond, past, around, over the various loopholes that, I've been guilty of all of them myself. Like, how do we get through that, recognizing that they exist?
Yeah, I mean, it's this balance we discussed that it's like, I think in the top rated Diet of 2021 podcast, we can't expect that everyone's going to understand all of the nuances of physiology. Like I'm not an expert in a ton of fields, right? Like I can't be nuanced in all of the things. So how do we combat this idea? And it's true. I don't think that everyone needs to be an expert. I don't think everyone needs to know the Krebs cycle to really make progress in their nutrition. But I think one of the good ways to kind of call yourself out is if you have to ask if something counts or not, if it fits or not, if it's allowed or not, or whatever the premise is, you're probably bending the rules, And I get that a lot with the 800-gram challenge. Like nobody's asking whether or not the apple counts or the broccoli counts. Like it's always like, what about the bean pasta, right? Or what about like this product made with, blueberries? And you're like, no, that's a product, right? And that's why you had to ask. And the black and white there is, it's like, you're still getting the blueberry nutrients in the blueberry oatmeal. But the problem is now that it's been put into this product that it changes the overall different nutrients you're getting, different calories you're getting, and it changes how much you would eat of that item compared to just eating the blueberries. Yeah,
that reminds me of like when my 3-year-old or almost 4-year-old asked me if he can do something. And the fact that he's asking means no, because you're going to get in trouble if you do it. And he's got this little ancient brain that's like, I should check first.
Totally.
The same rules with diet. If you've got to ask, that you're about to do something that you shouldn't do.
Almost always, yeah. If you have to ask against the diet rules, it's like, it's probably not really in the intent or the spirit of it. The other one that I think is kind of a really interesting nuance that I like to talk about is if the diet didn't work, it was probably your failed application of it. And I sometimes feel like when I say these statements, it's kind of with this air of this, like, I'm this all-knowing person and like have perfectly executed all of the things, when in reality, I'm just reliving my past failures here. And a great example of this is, I started CrossFit back in 2006 and the CrossFit and the Zone diet was the main diet du jour, of course. And for people that have been around the CrossFit community for some time, I'm sure you remember, Patrick, CrossFit originally prescribed pretty lean, we'll call them, zone prescriptions, pretty aggressively low. And I think there's some reason there for that. That could maybe be a podcast on its own. But I started at 15 blocks. And for the audience, I'm 6 feet tall. And of course, I was trying to do it on perfect paleo foods, which means there weren't a lot of hidden calories coming in from these different food sources.
Yep.
And basically what that means is I was shaking out to like eating 1,500 calories a day. Well, at that age and at my workout volume at that time, I probably needed at least 2,500, if not more calories per day. So no surprise, I was starving, like completely starving. Yeah. And so what I would do to meet the zone was I would do the zone blocks, but then CrossFit also said that you could have you could either do a cheat day or you could do like 2 or 3 cheat meals a week. And so I did the couple cheat meals a week. My God, they were epic. I mean, they were probably the largest. I mean, they weren't really like one plate of food, right? They were like these 2-hour stretches of just like, what can I eat in like 2 hours?
The Rock style cheat meals. You ever see his cheat meals on Instagram? Yeah.
Totally. Like totally out of control. And no surprise, I didn't really see any changes on the zone diet. Like I didn't get the 6-pack level of leanness or whatever. And in the end, it's because I ended up eating so many calories in these cheat meals that my total calories were the same, if not higher than before I had started the zone. Now, sure, we could say that the premise was off. Like, 16 blocks for my size and activity was just a little bit silly. Like, but the lesson really isn't that the zone didn't work. Like, I don't love the zone for some reasons, but its premise and what it overall recommends is still quite good. What the lesson is that somehow the quality and quantity of foods that I actually ate in real time was not right at the physiological level. So we don't have to say that it was like the diet didn't work or the rules didn't work. That if, we take some of these diets that are pretty good in terms of their messaging, whether or not that's zone or paleo or flexitarian, Mediterranean, I'll throw my 800-gram challenge, lazy macros in there, even macros in there. If your diet's not working, it's not the diet per se, it's how you're applying the diet rules. There's something that you're not accounting for. There's something that isn't quite right. And so, again, trying to bring this back to the black and white of my zone experiences. Yeah, I ate the 15 blocks and I did the recommended cheat meals or whatever like that. The nuance was total calories still matter, and I wasn't accounting for all of that. And so my second recommendation there for people is like, have the awareness, have the perspective that like diets are these shorthands, and you aren't really working with the whole deck. And because of that, you're not always going to get the right outcome.
One thing that comes to mind, or that I wonder about, is, this podcast, the Consistency Project, is actually based on something that you built out before the podcast existed, right? This simple tracker that you have on Optimize Me Nutrition that literally is just a yes or no on, and you might have to remind me, but the 800 grams protein intake, movement, exercise, and sleep, right? Simple yes, no, did we get it? Where have you found, maybe where have you experienced loopholes in the pursuit of, 100% day? And I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I've got a little loophole that like my sleep is like, I've got to be in bed at 9 o'clock, which can be hard with a couple of little kids because sometimes it's up to them. But like literally it happened last night. It was like 9:50. I was like, close enough.
There we go.
Right. But like, where does that end? Is it 9:30? Is that too, like, I don't, anyways, that's an aside, but this conversation is making me think that I've got to get a little bit stricter myself. But back to the question of the Consistency Project, where do you see folks maybe trying to find loopholes in maybe the other categories that we want to track?
Totally. I mean, this is the problem, the general problem in quotes with challenges, leaderboards type of thing, trackers. It's like the do it for the points mentality, right? Even in CrossFit gyms, I've been around them long enough. There's the problem of the rep shavers, right? Like, what do we do about the people who cheat to get the score on the whiteboard? And sure, there are loopholes in the Consistency Project. It's a simple tracker. You could check off that you're doing the 4 things and not really doing them so that you see your name at the top of the leaderboard. And there's a whole bunch of gray area with that too. And I like that you brought up the sleep one because, for the Consistency Project, there's ways to assess whether or not you're getting enough sleep. And it's like, well, maybe you were in bed for that number of hours, right? But you actually were up all night, not necessarily looking at your phone, but planning out your day or stressed for the next day. You didn't really sleep at all. Or maybe you're like, I got exercise because I walked my dog, but that's not really the intent of it, right? It's like, exercise with some type of intensity or challenge type of thing, or 800-gram challenge on watermelon type of idea. So there are tons of loopholes to all of this stuff. And I already mentioned it's kind of like a lot of trackers. I really do have a love-hate relationship with trackers. I love them. That's one of the reasons why I have a leaderboard that is sort of a daily simple tracker. I think it helps people drive adherence to these better practices. people like seeing progress. They like being rewarded in some way. And that's great. And we talked about that in the biohacking podcast, that sometimes these products just end up that people exercise more, or maybe they just eat a little better. And that's the great outcome of them. The hate part of my relationship with them is that check the box mentality, that like, now because I did the thing and I said that I did the thing on my app, I am now better because of that action. When really the tracker is actually one step removed from the action that matter. It's the actual working out that matters. It's the actual time that you are asleep that matters. It's the actual eating of the apple that matters, not necessarily what the app says. And so the tracker, the app, whatever it is, are trying to approximate a very complicated system. It's just like diet rules simplify the physiology from a nutrient perspective. These apps and these trackers are simplifying whatever system they are looking at. And I can tell you, I don't care how many different data points your app or tracker is collecting, it can still not describe all of the factors that are affecting your weight, health, and performance outcomes. It can't. And so we can't get so fixated on having a good score or having the data be right in the app and then never checking in with like ourselves in real time. Like, maybe you have to get in bed by 9 or whatever like that, but it's like, are you actually rested in the morning? Did you actually sleep? If we're talking about performance, like, are your workouts actually getting better? Is your deadlift going up? How is the diet going? Are you actually losing weight? Like, I don't care what the app says. Right. Are you actually losing the weight? Are you actually gaining the mass? Whatever it is. And so real life, has to be progressing just like the app is. And if it's not, then something in our application is wrong, regardless of what the app, the tracker, the points say. And typically, if they're going in different directions, like the app is telling me that, oh, I'm eating the right number of calories, but I'm not experiencing weight loss, I'm willing to bet you found a loophole.
I think we've talked about on the podcast before, your, just thinking about the consistency project, your plan, your goal to track every day for, I forget the length of time, but track every day long enough to actually get a sense of, well, what does a good score look like, right? Because let's go ahead and assume that you're going to get a good score, right? You're pretty dialed in on all these 4 metrics. So how is that process going? Have you been able to continue logging every day, and what does that look like?
Right. Yeah. So at consistency.optimizemenutrition.com, as you mentioned, there's this kind of companion project to the podcast, and it's just free. People can jump in at any time and start kind of tracking yes or no on those 4 items: 800-gram challenge, protein, exercise, and sleep. And I had started it, I don't know, maybe 6 months prior to our first podcast.
Yep.
And I had been, making an effort to track, but then I was like, okay, well, this is my whole like messaging, right? Let me at least do it consistently, post for a year and sort of see where I end up. And I do think that, quote, I should have a good score, right? If this is what I'm saying, people should be doing, I should be doing them to some level of proficiency here. And so I started tracking in August. So we're almost 5 months done. And yeah, it's going well. My score is averaging over a 3 because you get a point for each factor a day. And I don't think that a 4 is necessary because you're going to take days off from exercise, of course. And we're also not looking for perfection. It is shaking out to a little bit what I thought of how I do. Like 800-gram challenge is over 90%. Protein, I think, is close to 90%. Exercise is somewhere in the 70s, I believe, which makes sense with rest days. And then sleep, 62%.
That's dragging you down.
That sleep one, man. But yeah, I mean, it's good in the sense of, I do think the fact that I have to check in every day and actually be like, did I actually get the sleep? I think it's better than it would be without it. And that's sort of why I love it, in the sense of, I think it's making me be more mindful of that. Maybe not so much on the 800-gram challenge. But there also are these funny times when I'm like, at night, I'm thinking, well, shoot, I'm not going to get up at X hour because then I won't get my point, right? So you just have to watch yourself there.
How do you measure sleep? Is it like you've got a Fitbit or an Oura Ring, or is it just like I was in bed at 9 and I got out of bed at 6 and that's how I'm going to estimate my amount of sleep?
Yeah. So I say that people have to get at least 7 hours of sleep. And if they have some sort of tracker that actually measures time asleep, they can use that to measure it. But if you don't have a tracker, like I don't, we measure it as time in bed. And it's obviously with the lights off, no phone, no other activities. I mean, it has to be 7.5 hours to account kind of for like the falling asleep period. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the reason I have kind of a 9 o'clock is because I've got, like I mentioned, a 4-year-old and a almost 1-year-old, and almost no nights do I get an unbroken. So the only thing within my control is, well, I have to be in bed at 9, and then I'll usually read for 15 or 20 minutes. So that to me is like, that's the only thing honestly in my control, and everything else after that, it'd be great if I got 8 hours, but the chances are pretty slim. And so I'm going to just focus on the thing that I can focus on and try to win that. And then how the night shakes off is not up to me. So
totally.
That was fun. That was a good conversation about Loopholes. Just a reminder for folks to check out the membership option, members.optimizemenutrition.com, and use the code FREEMONTH for their first month for free. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you to all those who leave ratings and reviews. And if you like the show and you've got a friend who also might like the show, please share it with them. And we'll be back again soon for another episode of The Consistency Project.